Just waiting for the recording to get started. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm Dr. Leni Liebenberg. I am based at CERI, the Center for Epidemic Response and Innovation at Stellenbosch University. Something that CERI and Stellenbosch is incredibly passionate about is researcher development. And for this very reason, we are hosting this particular seminar with a very, very special guest, Lewin Moodley from PPS Investments, who will be speaking to us today about emotional intelligence and how to use that to get more out of your interactions with people to help you meet your professional goals. So to tell you a little bit more about Lewin Moodley in 2 seconds, I know she hates it when I do this, so I'm just going to embarrass her for a little bit longer. Lewin is a learning and development manager at PPS Investments. Lewin brings a wealth of expertise with over 10 years of experience as a registered skills development facilitator, as a seasoned business coach and program designer. Lewin has this commitment. I say this because I know her in a personal and a professional capacity. She's got this wonderful commitment to professional growth and organizational development. Lewin, thank you very much for being with us today. This community is a blend of researchers based at Stellenbosch University and outside. We've got students, postgrads, postdocs, early career researchers. All of us have professional goals that we are working towards and are quite interested to learn more about how emotional intelligence can help us meet those goals. For our participants within the session, the aim for this is to be as interactive as possible. If you can and it doesn't affect bandwidth, you're welcome to switch on your cameras. We ask that you keep your microphones muted unless you'd like to participate within the discussion. We will be monitoring the chat box. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments or any additions to the discussion, by all means, please do pop it in the chat box. Right. Lewin Moodley, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. And I look forward to your messages. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be speaking about emotional intelligence today. Just ending one of the sessions in face-to-face sessions and now going into an online session. Sorry, I'm just hearing a bit of a feedback. So, I mean, you may be asking yourself, what does PPS Investments have to do with emotional intelligence or the session at that? Just to give you a bit of a context, at PPS Investments, we are a financial services provider, and our purpose is to empower graduate professionals to live the lives they want to live in a world worth living. So this session on its own is in support of that purpose and that mission. So hopefully at the end of the session, you'd have learned a little bit more about emotional intelligence and you'd be able to navigate those emotions or those scenarios a little bit better following the session. So as Lenine said, please feel free to switch on your camera. It's really lonely up here. It's really nice to see faces if you feel comfortable. And of course, please use the chat box if you want to ask any questions, or the emoticons, that's also fine. All right, so I'm going to dive straight into it. I think we have until 3:30 with this session. So starting straight off the bat, emotional intelligence, I like to ask this question: what does it mean to you? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to go to Mentimeter, menti.com if you look on top. And if you go on your phone, on your mobile, or on your computer, you can capture menti.com. And then there's a little code that's going to appear that you need to capture, and it's 53925068. And you can just capture your response in terms of what does emotional intelligence mean to you? I see there's an apology in the chat. I don't think I can paste the link, sorry. Oh, I see you did already. Okay, so I'm just going to give you 5 minutes. Hopefully the code is working. 5, 3. Excellent. All right, so you can see empathy and understanding, being aware of your and others' emotional cues, being able to negotiate relationships productively, ability to recognize, understand, and manage one's own emotions as well as the emotions of others. It's really smart people in this room. Being able to view and act and respond accordingly to situations from viewpoints other than your own, knowing yourself to connect better with others, the ability to self-regulate in personal and interpersonal situations, effective communication. I wonder if I'm able to move. Okay, there. I can't really move it, the screen now. That's an error. All right, but there's quite a few responses here, and it's pretty much all of the above. So we have really a really intelligent audience today, which is great. I'm going to move to the next screen where you can see what Daniel Goleman, who is a world-renowned psychologist, explains emotional intelligence, to be. So it's understanding one's own feelings, empathy for the feelings of others, and the regulation of emotions in a way that enhances your life. So I mean, if you refer to the feedback that we received earlier, it's very much in line with this. And hopefully through this session, I'm going to walk you through this statement so that it's clear and you're able to understand what it means. To get there, we have to start with the basics. So I'm going to explain to you the rational mind versus the emotional mind. So if we think of the emotional mind, it's really hot, it's feelings focused, and there's a really quick reaction time. Whereas with a reasonable mind, it's cool, calm, takes logic into account and past experience when it comes to making decisions or choosing the way forward. Where we want to be in the scenario is where we are able to take into account our emotional mind, where we are able to understand what we're feeling and why we're feeling it. But then we are not allowing our emotional mind to cloud our judgment when we are navigating our way forward. So we are still able to use logic, past experience, and being rational to make the decision in terms of how we're able to respond. So what do I mean when I say that? If you've ever been in a scenario like this, where you have a debate or an argument with someone, you say something out of frustration, and then later when your emotions settle, you regret it. I'm sure as you're sitting there, you're probably nodding your head because you can identify with that. Where you lashed out at a friend or a colleague or a partner because you were angry or you were frustrated. But when you were able to calm down and you reflected on what you had said, you felt really bad. So that is a scenario where you allowed your emotions to consume the situation, where your emotional mind was sort of taking control of the situation. Another scenario would be if where you are able or where you shy away from certain tasks like public speaking or doing a presentation or anything that places you in the spotlight because you have a fear or there's anxiety involved with doing that task. So you would rather avoid doing it. That is another scenario where you are operating using your emotional mind. And then finally, let's say you have a supervisor or a friend provide you feedback on a task that you had done, and your first response is to defend your task, or defend why you think that what you've done is accurate and their feedback is useless, essentially. But later, when you're reflecting on what they had said, you find that there is, in fact, some merit to what they're saying. That is another scenario of where you are using your emotional mind to cloud your judgment. It's taking control of the situation and you are no longer operating on a reasonable mind. In those scenarios, through emotional intelligence, you would need to be able to identify what is triggering you, what is making you feel that way, understanding those emotions, but not allowing it to derail your objective or to derail what you are hoping to achieve. You're still able to depend on your past experiences and logic when you are choosing or navigating your way forward. So that is essentially having control over your emotions. All right. So in front of us, you can see these are the features of emotional intelligence. The first one is self-awareness. This is when you are able to understand what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. The second one is self-regulation. When you're able to handle your emotions in an effective way. And then also, I like to refer to motivation. So I speak about self regulation and motivation together because it means that you're able to regulate your emotions so that it doesn't get in the way of what you are hoping to achieve. And that's the motivation behind it. Then we refer to empathy, and that is understanding what someone else could be feeling. And then finally, social skills is essentially putting it all together in a way that enhances your relationships. All right, I just want to pause to see if I have any questions at this stage. No? Are you saying no for the group? Okay.
No, there are no questions for the group at this stage.
Lovely. All right. So before we go, I'm going to move over to a model, which is essentially what this whole workshop is all about. And it's called the Emotional ABCDEs. And this model was designed by Albert Ellis in his field of rational emotive therapy. I want to start with the end in mind where if you can understand that what you think impacts what you are feeling, and what you are feeling impacts how you respond or how you react. That is what we need to sort of control or manage through the emotional ABCDEs. So usually we have a presentation at the end of the session, but today we're going to have an exercise because, as I mentioned earlier, through PPS investments and with CERI, we really want to enhance or empower graduate professionals. So what we'll be doing is that there will be a online assessment at the end of the session that you would need to complete. It shouldn't take longer than 10 minutes. And the assessment will solely be on this emotional ABCDEs, just to ensure that you understand the concept and the model and that you are able to apply it. Once you are done with the assessment, once the 10-minute mark has passed, the results will display on the screen so that we can validate and verify and confirm that everybody is comfortable with this tool and this model that you can use going forward. If I have any questions around that, please let me know. So before I move on, I just want to ensure that everybody understands what they need to do. Yes.
Do you mean to say that this is a test that we need to take within the session?
Absolutely. Yes. So there's going to be a link. I'm going to post the link at the end of the presentation. Everybody will then just click on the link, complete the assessment for 10 minutes, and then the results will display on the screen. So the bottom line is just ensure that you sort of pay attention specifically to this part. Any questions? I think everybody's comfortable. Yes, I have a question. Is that Dr. Smith?
Hi, I joined late. I'm so sorry. So I just got the tail end of the test, the quiz, and that I wanted to know if I missed anything prior to the current slide that's on the screen now.
No, this is the very, very first screen. I haven't gone into it just yet, so I am going to be explaining it. You haven't missed anything.
Thank you.
Awesome. Perfect. So I'm happy to announce, Dr. Smith, that there will be no assessment, and thanks for asking that question. I think you are probably not the only one that may have been a little bit nervous, wondering, what have I missed? Did I get all the information? Did I document everything? Um, but the whole intention here is I wanted you to feel what an activating event is. So I created the scenario to pretend as if there is something that could be triggering or something that could cause an emotional reaction or response with you. And for this moment, I just want you to sit in it to feel that emotion. I'm going to go into the emotional ABCDE so that you can understand what I'm referring to. So A refers to an activating event. By me explaining the test that you need to do, that in essence is an activating event. You would have your beliefs on the event. C is the consequences. D is where you need to dispute the beliefs. And then E finally is to effect new beliefs. And I'm going to show you in practice what that actually means. Oh gosh. Right. So in the previous scenario, we had the activating event being the presentation. In this scenario, I spoke about you doing the assessment or the test at the end of the session. So that, in other words, could be an activating event if you were triggered, emotionally triggered. If that was an activating event for you, you could have felt stressed or overwhelmed or have maybe anxiety or worry. Some of you could even have felt as if you were excited. So I just want to take another poll to see maybe what the feelings were in the room. If you were excited, if there was a little bit of panic, if there was maybe some nervousness.
What about more than slight panic?
Yeah, so when I look at 9, then it's that looks like panic. Removing the slight.
I didn't check if anybody left the meeting when
I
they
was
realized
really watching to see if somebody was going to leave the room. Okay, so I'm happy to see that there were some people who were excited, so that's good. But for the most part, there was some panic happening and, of course, nervousness. Okay, so I really want to unpack what was happening there with you. And I needed to sit in that feeling because, believe it or not, there were stories or there was a perspective that you had that caused that emotional reaction. And earlier I mentioned that what you think impacts what you feel. And what you feel impacts how you respond. So in this scenario, it says presentation, but let's refer to the test that I mentioned earlier. And for most of you, the consequence was slight panic, right? Now you have to tap into why was there the panic? And that panic has to do around your beliefs around the event, your beliefs around the test that you were going to take. What story did you tell yourself about that test that you had to take? And for the most part, people would have felt like they could have made a mistake, they could have made errors, they didn't listen accurately. Now the results are going to be displayed. Everybody's going to see how much they got out of 10, out of 20. They're going to think that you're not smart enough. How could you be at this university? There was probably a whole long story that you told yourself. What you need to take away from this is that the event for you was the test. What you told yourself about you taking that test caused that emotional reaction. There was a story that you told yourself, and that's why you started to panic. What we need to do with the emotional ABCD is it's all around updating your thought process, changing your perspective. And how you do that is by debating the story or the beliefs that you have or updating your perspective. You can tell yourself around, listen, I may make a mistake, But if I take notes, if I listen attentively, I mean, I am at university, I must have some brain capacity. I should be able to do this test. I've done well in other assessments. I can do this. That is a way of debating the story or the perspective that you have in order to update it and change it into new beliefs and to have a new emotional reaction. For those of you who were excited to take the assessment, that is sort of where you want to be. You want to be in a space that you are confident and you're excited to move forward. But in the scenarios where you had a slight panic, your thoughts are actually derailing your objectives or your potential. Because of the perspective or the story that you tell yourself about yourself, it's stopping you or restricting you from reaching your full potential or behaving in a way that you could behave. I think we had some feedback. I'm not sure if there's a question out there.
No question.
No question. It was probably just went off the mute button, and that's fine. Okay, so how does this work in practice, for example? Because it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult to do because it's something that happens in the moment. So I know that all of you, I can't obviously see your faces and I can't see the reactions that you had. And most of us, all the responses that you have happens internally. It's not obvious to everyone. So you need to manage and update those emotions immediately. One of the stories I just told now recently is that I had to do a workshop with a team, with my company. And in order to do this workshop, I had to be trained on the workshop. And once I was trained, they would have a panel that would observe me and sort of sign me off before I can do the session. And I've been doing sessions for a very long time, over 10 years. So I'm quite comfortable to deliver workshops. Obviously, I do have a little bit of nerves here and there, but it's nothing major. But for some odd reason, when they had to train me on this particular workshop, I had so much anxiety. It was exhausting. I was exhausted at the end of the day. I would practice in my yard, walk up and down, practice my lines, have my script, and in between, I'd sort of have a meltdown as to why I just cannot learn the session. I can't do it. I can't move forward. I tried to get out of it, but I couldn't get out of it. They kept pushing me to do this workshop. And even though I understood the emotional ABCDEs, I wasn't able to incorporate it or embed it or use the tools to help me overcome the emotion. And this was even while I was training the session. And I'll tell you why it's so difficult. It's not always easy to manage the emotions. It's because I didn't realize what I was actually doing to myself. I didn't know I was painting a picture in my mind about what I thought was going to happen. So as I was doing my lines in my yard, walking up and down, rehearsing this presentation or this workshop that I had to deliver in front of the judges, I was visualizing the judges very quickly because it happens in a split second that I don't even know I'm doing it. I was visualizing the judges say things like, but that's not the way we trained you how to do this workshop. That's not the script that we gave you. That's not how you're supposed to land the message. I was visualizing negative reviews in an instant, in a split second that I didn't even know I was doing it. And those visuals that were flashing in front of my eyes, those are the images or the perspective that gave me all that anxiety that made me not want to continue. So my point is that you have to, when you're emotionally triggered, you need to reset and you need to be mindful, pay attention to the visuals and the story that you're telling yourself mentally. Because that is the perspective and the story that's causing that emotional reaction. And in that moment, you need to debate the story or debate the perspective that you're telling yourself. In other words, you need to reframe it so that it pushes you forward and doesn't push you backward. And what I realized is that in that moment, I had to update the visuals that I was sending, or the messages I was sending myself, or the visuals I was seeing in my mind as I was rehearsing in the yard. So I changed it, and I walked up and down with my script, visualized the judges, but this time I visualized the judges saying things like, "Oh my goodness, Lewin, that is so amazing. Well done. That's fantastic. I love the angle you chose with landing that message." So that's the images I was seeing. I know for myself that that's what I had to do to encourage me to move forward. That's the reframing, that's the angle, that's the lens, and that's the perspective that I had to have in order to propel myself forward. I cannot express it enough that it's actually your own thoughts and your own perspective and your own story that you're telling yourself that's causing your emotional reaction in a split second. And that emotional reaction is encouraging or choosing or negating the action that you are going to take. It's very important that you debate that perspective, reframe the perspective, and navigate your way forward using the ABCDEs. I want to give you one scenario that I had now recently. Last week, I went camping, and on the way back, our car broke down. So we have a broken car. Came home to a broken fridge, and the roof is leaking. So it's 1, 2, 3. Really a fun weekend for us. And I would tell the story to so many people, and many of my friends be like, "Oh, Lewin, I'm so sorry. That's really sucky, and it's 1, 2, 3. When it rains, it pours." All those things, and all this feedback just makes me also feel sorry for myself, and I go deeper in my little hole, and it's not fun down there. And I had one friend that said something different, and she said, "Oh wow, Lewin, that's pretty amazing. The universe really wants new beginnings for you." And immediately I smiled, and it's almost as if I shifted, and I sat straight up, and I felt my posture change, because I didn't. Her view and her perspective of my situation gave me a different lens and a different angle to view it, and it makes me excited. Yes, of course, there's cost involved, right? But I'm excited to start a new chapter, get a new fridge, fix the roof, get a new car, fix the car, whatever. But it's new and it's exciting and it's different. And that's the power of the perspective that you have and that you choose. And something that I'm very excited about is reframing your current scenario, your lens, so that it propels you forward. Do I have any questions before I move on to the next slide? No. Awesome. So I want to move on to understanding your triggers, right? What you need to understand in this scenario is that there are certain situations, scenarios that you are more sensitive to than other people. And this is for a number of reasons why you are more sensitive to it. But for the most part, you are sensitive to a particular scenario because of an historical situation, something that happened in your past, something along your journey that now makes the scenario something that you are more sensitive to. And that's a trigger. What you need to do is understand what those triggers are. Another word for a trigger is an activating event. Your activating event or your trigger is not necessarily someone else's trigger. So you need to really get to know yourself. Because once you are triggered, there's an awareness that needs to happen so that you can regulate yourself. When people are triggered, there are some bodily reactions that could occur, and you need to understand what those are. For example, if I am triggered, I know that my heart is going to start racing. It's going to go, and I know, okay, well, Lewin, you are triggered. Some people will have a heat wave sort of wash over them once they're triggered. Some people get sweaty palms. Their palms start getting really sweaty. Some as their eyebrow will raise. Some people say they smile when they're triggered. So we all have different reactions, but that's another alert for you to know that you are triggered, right? And once you know you're triggered, you need to kick in your ABCDEs, where you need to do a quick evaluation of what is triggering you, um, and being able to not allow your emotional mind to cloud your judgment in terms of what your next steps are going to be. Because now that you know that you are emotionally triggered, you should be operating on your emotional mind, which is quick, hot, fast reaction time. You should be, but through working with the ABCDEs, you need to update that perspective so that you can understand what you're feeling, but not allow it to cloud your judgment or your logic or your past experiences to navigate your way forward, right? And that's by updating your belief, right? So I'm going to allow you 5 minutes in a moment for you to reflect on what your personal triggers could be. But I want to give you an example before you go into that 5 minutes of reflection. So, for example, I know that one of my I have two major triggers, and your triggers don't generally change, but you do need to be aware of them and you do need to be able to manage them. So, one of my triggers are that I don't it really impacts me if somebody tries to taint my brand. So that means for my personal branding. So that is, for example, if somebody says I didn't do a job well, or okay, that's actually fine because I can learn from that. But if somebody says something that's untrue about myself, that's a big trigger for me. Or if somebody speaks to me as if they are superior, or if somebody tries to belittle me, it's major triggers for me. And I know that in that moment, my heart's going to start racing and I'm going to want to respond. That is the sign that I need to utilize my ABCDEs to regulate that emotion, get my heart rate to slow down, and to be able to use a logical and rational way forward when I respond. I want to give you an example. I was in a big meeting. We had our operations manager that was there, and he mentioned that, I asked Lewin to hand in this 2 weeks ago, and I never got it. Once I get that, then I'll be able to provide you with feedback or whatever the case may be. The operations manager was not even finished with his sentence, and my heart already started racing. And I knew in that moment that I was triggered. And I knew why I was triggered because I felt that he was tainting my brand. So in that moment, the things that were rushing through my mind in a snapshot were everybody's going to think I'm an underperformer. They're going to think I'm lazy. They're going to think I'm useless. Um, I'm going to be painted as, why did we even hire this person? Those are all the things that's rushing through my mind, and um, I was angry. But in that moment, I had to use the ABCDEs to help me regulate my emotions. And I asked myself questions like, oh, I debated it in a way of perhaps he doesn't know, Lewin. Maybe he doesn't know that you handed it in 3 weeks ago. Maybe because he's so overwhelmed and is tasked with so many items that it didn't occur to him that it was in his mailbox, you had emailed him about it, and it has been delivered already. Maybe he just doesn't know. And through debating it, I was able to regulate my emotions. And I asked the question, did you know that I emailed it to you 3 weeks ago? Um, But I said it in a way that's also not triggering for him. I said something along the lines, I know you're really busy, but I actually sent it 3 weeks ago. And then his response was, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Please forgive me. I was unaware. And that was that. That was the end of it. So in an instant, that whole situation could have gone in a completely different direction if I had allowed my emotional mind to get the better of me. So that's one scenario. I think at the end of the day, what you need to focus on for yourself is to understand what your triggers are. That's the starting point. Number two, what bodily reactions do you have? Because even if you miss that you've been triggered, your bodily reaction is going to be your alarm bell. That's going to be, pay attention, you've been triggered. And that's when you need to kick in your the model of the emotional ABCDEs. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is just sit down in the 5 minutes and reflect on at least 2 or 3 scenarios in the past where you felt you were emotionally triggered. And in those scenarios, I want you to try and pinpoint what the activating event / trigger was in that scenario. That's how we're able to, or you'd be able to identify what your possible triggers are. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, just 3 scenarios. Okay. Can you hear that? I don't think I shared with sound. I'm just going to stop and then reshare, okay? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Could you hear the sound of the presentation?
I can't hear the sound.
Okay, I'm just going to reshare with, because, you know, I have another presentation that has, or another slide that has sound, so I must make sure that the sound is on. Okay. Where is this? Get that away.
Don't hear it, but the picture is quite calming.
Can you can't hear it?
It's just some music, right?
Yes, it's just music and the timer. Sorry, I can't get technical difficulties. Just give me a second. There we go.
You've been triggered.
little bit of panic happening.
Well, time is moving on, and we can still think about our triggers in the background.
Awesome. All right. It is quite calming, that sound. Okay, so you were given 5 minutes just to reflect on your past scenarios when you were triggered. And if you had to pinpoint those particular triggers or the underlying reason of what caused you to be triggered, i.e., the activating event, you will find that there's a possibility that there's some kind of similarity between the three scenarios, if you were able to do that. In most cases, um, your activating event or your trigger is actually the same underlying cause. That's one thing that you could have established. It could have been three completely different scenarios, and that's also fine. But as long as you're able to pinpoint what the trigger is, what is the scenario that's triggering for you? And the reason why you need to know that is that when you are placed in that situation, let's say, for example, one of your triggers is that if somebody belittles you or speaks down to you, and you're placed in a scenario where somebody does that to you, you need to know that you are triggered, and you are most likely going to respond using your emotional mind. You need to know that it's time to utilize your emotional ABCDEs to be able to regulate your emotions so that you can operate or change your perspective or um, navigate the best way forward for yourself. So, based on everything that we've discussed thus far, I just want to reflect on what happened in the beginning and what could have occurred. So, starting with your activating event, this is where you thought that you needed to do an assessment. And you did a little bit of self-talk, which means you could have told yourself that you could make a mistake, your marks aren't going to be high, people's going to judge you. That's a little bit of self-talk that you could have done. There could have been an emotional consequence, which is, of course, where there was a slight panic, feeling overwhelmed, a little bit of worry, nervousness, sometimes excitement. But following that emotional consequence, you could have chosen an action. There's something that you could have done. So let's just replay. Test. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to get low marks. Having a lot of panic. You could have chosen to exit this workshop. And there could have been like a mass exodus. There could have been 10 people that left at the same time, feeling the same emotions. Because you could have felt, I don't want to do this. I don't want to place myself under this much stress, having to do an assessment, a test for what? I'm already under a lot of pressure and test. I don't need another task to do. So you could have chosen to leave the workshop. 10 of you, 12 of you, 15 of you could have left the workshop. And I can see the numbers. And that action could actually be my activating event. I could do a little self-talk. I could tell myself, Lewin, this workshop is not engaging enough. It's not good enough for people. What have you done? Maybe you didn't choose the right career. You're really horrible at this. You shouldn't be in learning and development. Maybe being a facilities manager is better for you. I don't know. This could make me feel sad, depleted, deflated. And I could maybe even choose to go in a different direction, choose a completely different career, because that's extreme scenarios, right? But the point is that I want to showcase how you being triggered, you doing your self-talk, having an emotional consequence or reaction, and possibly choosing an action. I want to showcase that your action could actually be an activating event for somebody else. And that's the other side. Of emotional intelligence. And that's the part around empathy. Because now that we are able to understand what we're feeling and why we're feeling it, it's very difficult to pick it up of when somebody else is triggered. But now that you understand what it feels like and what happens internally and how you're telling yourself a story, you need to try to be able to identify it in other people. So there's mindfulness, empathy, recognize and interpret the nonverbal cues, adjust and amend based on feedback you are getting. So, for example, if you know that when people are triggered, maybe their heart starts racing or they get the heat wave. And some people with the heat wave, you can see it on their face, they'll start getting red. So you know there's some sort of emotional reaction going on. Um, you can see maybe some people start actually sweating on their face because you know that could also be another emotional reaction or bodily reaction because of being triggered. Those are the ways of how you need to be able to recognize and interpret the nonverbal cues. When you are able to see it, you need to adjust what you're saying to get a different response. So the example I usually give is um, I had two colleagues ask for my assistance at one point, um, and I never felt it was my responsibility. So I said, listen, guys, I don't think it's my responsibility, but let's navigate the way forward. And they said, oh, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. We will just do it. And they started walking away. And the fact that there were two of them and they both had the exact same response to what I said, it alerted me that perhaps the way I communicated it was maybe a little bit too aggressive or too assertive, where they felt that or they interpreted my feedback as I did not want to do it. It's not my job. And that was not my intention. My intention was I wanted us to debate friendly to determine whose task it is, where I would say this is why I think it's not mine, and they will say this is why they think it is mine, and we'll go up and down until we figure out whose task it is. And when I realized that, I said to them, guys, this is actually what I mean, and I rephrased. And then you could see they relaxed and they were comfortable with my feedback, and then we did the little bit of a debate. So that's the other side of emotional intelligence, is being able to identify that in other people. And when it's different to what you intend the scenario or your conversation to be, you need to reframe it, rephrase it, so that it can be exactly what you intend it to be. You need to be able to identify that with other people. I'm just going to play a little clip for you.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I'm sure that there's so many of you that can relate to that. I always say that I'm guilty of the at least part. While my intention is to be helpful, using at least is not always helpful, and it probably does the opposite. But when it comes to empathy, um, there is, if we utilize the scenario of having a bit of a debate with a colleague, a partner, and earlier I gave the scenario where you say something that later you regret, right? Through empathy, you need to be able to identify when somebody else says something in the heat of the moment. You know that that person is sort of operating on the emotional mind, and they probably don't mean to say those things. Um, that is a way to help you to not be triggered in the moment, to help you to apply empathy for their situation, to know that maybe they were triggered and they actually don't mean to say those things. So that doesn't excuse the behavior. It doesn't mean that what they said or did is right. But in that moment, you need to be able to identify that they're most likely operating on the emotional mind and they probably don't mean those things. Allow them to walk away, calm the emotions, and then be able to have a productive conversation. So I want to move back to the features of emotional intelligence to showcase how we were able to move through that in today's session. So the first one being self-awareness. This is where you were able to navigate or unpack what your triggers are. So being able to know what you're feeling in that moment and why you're feeling it. What is the root cause of this feeling? Then self-regulation through utilizing the ABCDEs to help you regulate that emotion. And you do it because of the motivation, because there's something that you want to achieve. There's an objective at the end of the road. And then empathy, being able to understand what other people are feeling, being able to pick up on those nonverbal cues. And then finally, social skills is putting it all together in a way that enhances your life. So I think I've pretty much reached the end of the workshop. From my side, I sincerely hope that there was something, anything, one thing that you were able to take away from this workshop today. If you were able to identify what your triggers are, understand that it's because of your perspective, because of what you're thinking that's impacting what you're feeling, and that's what's affecting or impacting the action that you choose to taking. All you need to do is to update your perspective, reframe your view through the ABCDEs, and that will help you make more wise decisions. From my side, thanks so much. I hope that you learned something today. Over to you.
You mean me?
Yes, you.
Well done, Lewin. I'm just sitting here with a page full of notes. The content was fantastic. 5 minutes. I actually don't think 5 minutes was enough to sit and reflect on your own triggers. It was such an eye opener. I recognized, oh, this event had me with a red face on a call the other day, and everybody could see it. And noting what those triggers actually were and how I can prevent the action that I took, to make it be more productive rather than what actually turned out to be. Having a better handle on my understanding of my own emotions, and having that lead to a better understanding of the people that I'm trying to connect with as well. It's invaluable. So thank you so much for the lessons that you imparted today. We do have a minute, a single minute, for any burning questions or comments within the chat, the group. If anybody would like to pose a question to Lewin, feel free to raise your hand. Yeah, I see there was we do have a question, comment. You're welcome to unmute.
Hi, it's Candace here. That was a really great talk. Thank you, Lewin. I just wanted to ask from Lewin, any chance you are available to other groups for this talk? I know there's lots of people who can potentially benefit from it.
Absolutely. I was asked if I could do it again next week, Tuesday, at the PPS Lounge at Stellenbosch campus. I don't know if you based on that side. Otherwise, I can leave my contact information in the chat, and perhaps you can reach out to me.
Thank you so much.
I'll add to that as well. So Lewin has and thank you, I'm very grateful, Lewin, volunteered to share her insights 4 times a year within the CERI team. And we will, as we are today, make broadcast it as far as we possibly can to ensure that more people are able to benefit from Lewin's vast experience in learning and development within the financial sector. Clearly, it is of use to us in our academic sphere as well. So when we do share these invites, please do circulate. Lewin, is that fine? I'm just putting you out there.
Absolutely, because I see there's another question if it could be done at the Tygerberg campus.
As in on-site, in person.
Yeah, that's one of the questions. Because I actually did it today, so perhaps next time we do it in campus, then maybe more people could attend for the in-person one.
Fantastic. So we'll make sure that we invite and share the invite as far as possible. Lewin, thank you so much for being available to us. We really do value your experience and your insight, and it absolutely will help us along our professional journeys. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again when you speak to us about adopting a growth mindset. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll be sure to circulate the invitation to Stellenbosch University and beyond. Thank you, Lewin.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thanks. Bye.